few things before we get started. First of all, today we're going to talk about Lesson 3 in Chapter 29. There is no school tomorrow on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we're going to do Lesson 4, much in the same manner that we're doing today's lesson, where you'll watch a video and you'll fill out your review sheet. On Thursday, we'll do a review game in class. I'll also give you some more specifics as far as what to expect as far as the test. We've gone through some things pretty quickly, so I'm going to give you some really good information as far as what to study. And then on Friday, we will take the test. Remember that you also have your projects coming due. You'll actually start giving your presentations next week, so you need to keep working on that as well. Well, the first thing that you're going to see on your review sheet is the Tet Offensive. The Tet Offensive is actually a number of different battles that take place. One of those battles is going to be Khe Sanh. I won't ask you anything about Khe Sanh, but it's probably one of the more recognizable battles, but it is all part of this Tet Offensive, or these number of battles that take place. The main attacks actually begin on January 30th, 1968, at the start of Tet. And what I would put down on your review sheet, the Tet Offensive, that occurred on the Vietnamese New Year. Typically, for the New Year, there kind of be like a ceasefire, kind of like a Christmas truce that we might have like during World War II. But in 1968, the battles continued, which was kind of a surprise. But during the Tet Offensive, the North Vietnamese actually launched an attack on the South. Some 84,000 communist soldiers attacked 12 U.S. military bases, more than 100 cities, and so a lot of damage was done during this Tet Offensive. This is just a picture kind of showing a battle from the Tet Offensive, and again, a lot of airplanes and those kinds of things. A lot of times they used body counts as a measure of success during the Vietnam War, and that kind of, they were giving newscasts of all the body counts and things. That may not have been exactly the best way to kind of say who was winning or who wasn't winning this. If you look at number 2 on your review sheet, it says, what were the effects of the Tet Offensive? One of the things that it did is it showed that South Vietnam, none of that was actually safe from attack. It also shattered the Americans' belief that the U.S. would soon win the war. The Tet Offensive did not bring the war to a quick end, like many had hoped, and so that was also an effect. A third effect that you could put down was Walter Cronkite actually gave a report about the Tet Offensive. And on number 3, Walter Cronkite, so it's an effect of the Tet Offensive, but you might want to, for Walter Cronkite, what I would put down is he was highly trusted. He was very respected as a news anchor, and he'd been to Vietnam, and he came on the news, and he basically kind of says that, he's not sure that this war is winnable. And we'll go ahead and watch a clip here of what he said here. But you can see these figures here. It shows how many forces the U.S. lost. The ARVN, that is the South Vietnamese Army and how much they lost. And then here you have the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, which are the communists in the South. 45,000 of them were actually killed. Here is that video of Walter Cronkite and what he says.
To say that we are closer to victory today is to believe, in the face of the evidence, the optimists who have been wrong in the past. To suggest we are on the edge of defeat is to yield to unreasonable pessimism. To say that we are mired in stalemate seems the only realistic, if unsatisfactory, conclusion. On the off chance that military and political analysts are right, in the next few months we must test the enemy's intentions in case this is indeed his last big gasp before negotiations. But it is increasingly clear to this report that the only rational way out then will be to negotiate, not as victims, but as an honorable people who lived up to their pledge to defend democracy and did the best they could. This is Walter Cronkite. Good night.
A couple things about that report. One of the things is he actually comes out at the very beginning and he says this is his personal opinion, this is one reporter's opinion, and typically reporters hadn't really used their opinion in their reports prior to this. And so that was one thing that was different about it. President Johnson actually states that if I've lost Conkright, I've lost Middle America. Time and News Magazine, they also began to express doubts as to whether or not this war was winnable or not. Walter Cronkite used to always sign off with, "That's the way it was," and then he'd give the date. But on this particular broadcast, he just said kind of good night. That was another difference about this. But this had a huge impact on the war. Once Walter Cronkite comes out and says the war might not be winnable, you start having a lot more protesting and a lot more criticism about the Vietnam War. Johnson starts to lose supports. Robert McNamara, I won't ask you him on a quiz or a test, but he starts thinking too that maybe we cannot win this war and we need to start looking for ways to end the war. So on number 5 there, Richard Nixon, we'll get to that here in just a second here. But we have a new election coming up in 1968. And one of the people that start running is Eugene McCarthy. He challenged Johnson for the Democratic Party's nomination. Johnson is in the Democratic Party. And you also have Robert Kennedy, who is JFK's little brother. He's the Attorney General. And they are all three kind of vying for the Democratic, for their support. And President Johnson kind of surprises the nation when he comes out and he says he would not seek nor would he accept the office of presidency. And I've got a little clip here for you to watch.
I shall not seek, and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
This was kind of historic. It surprised even a lot of people that supported Johnson. Johnson was very low in the polls at this point, and so it really, I guess it surprised his staff maybe a little bit, but he had lost a lot of support at this time. General Westmoreland, he's actually who's leading the American troops. He asks for more U.S. troops, more ground soldiers. President Johnson actually denies sending more soldiers over to Vietnam. His advisors couldn't come up with anything else that they should be doing. Robert McNamara suggests that they start limiting their airstrikes. They might start trying to negotiate a little bit. And Johnson did start trying to negotiate with the North Vietnamese. These negotiations were called the Paris Peace Talks. I don't have that on the review sheet here, so you won't have to put those down. But that was the first peace talks that took place, and they end up stalling. They really don't go anywhere, and there's a couple reasons they don't go anywhere. One of those is that the United States wanted all the North Vietnamese troops to leave South Vietnam, and they weren't really willing to do that. And the other thing that North Vietnam would not accept was they wanted a temporary South Vietnam that was democratic, that would include a U.S.-backed president. They refused to sign that, and so the peace talks end up kind of stalling out at that point. Now we're going to get a little bit more to what's happening in this election. Johnson says he will not win or will not run. On the Democratic side, you've got Hubert Humphrey, who steps into the race to defend Johnson and his policies. You've got Senator McCarthy. I won't ask you a whole lot about him, who comes into the race. And then you have Robert Kennedy. Robert Kennedy is number 4 on your review sheet. He's also calling for an end to the war. That's very popular in the Midwest, in Indiana, Nebraska, as well as in California. He wins a lot of votes for coming out and saying that. Well, they have their Democratic convention in Chicago, and this is where all the electors meet and they kind of decide who is going to be the party's nomination. And at this Democratic National Convention, Kennedy walks off the stage and he is shot by a gentleman known as Sirhan Sirhan. Sirhan Sirhan is number 6. What I would put for that is he is who assassinated Robert Kennedy. He was upset with Kennedy's policies and ultimately Johnson's followed that policy as well, as that we supported Israel in the Israeli conflict between Israel and Palestine. And he was upset with that. He was from Jordan, didn't really like us supporting Israel. He wanted us supporting Palestine. And so he shot President Kennedy. Or sorry, President or the nominee, Robert Kennedy. So the delegates at the National Convention in Chicago, they debated them between McCarthy and Humphrey. And so they're trying to each get votes. There's a lot of violence that breaks out at the convention. The Chicago mayor, Richard Daley, actually has to send the troops out in order to maintain this order when the violence broke out. And the television crews captured some of this violence. And I do have a video here to show some of the violence in Chicago.
For Democrats, the Chicago Convention of 1968 was a nightmare. Leading after the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy, Democrats fell into chaos, fighting Chicago police and each other.
With George McGovern as President of the United States, we wouldn't have to have Gestapo tactics in the streets of Chicago.
Mr. Daley is not pleased with Senator Rivercroft.
How hard it is to accept the truth.
Vice President Hubert Humphrey, hobbled by the unpopularity of President Johnson and his Vietnam War policies, appealed for order.
Surely we have now learned the lesson that violence breeds counter-violence, and it cannot be condoned, whatever the source.
It didn't work. Humphrey's November defeat ushered in the era of Republican presidential dominance, with 7 GOP victories in the last 10 elections.
Okay, so we talked about what happened on the Democratic side there. As far as number 7, what is significant about the 1968 Democratic election in Chicago? I would say that it was plagued with a lot of violence. I would also make sure that I put down that that is where Robert Kennedy was assassinated. On the Republican side, you have Spiro Agnew, who ends up being Nixon's running mate. Nixon actually gets the nomination from the Republicans. He appealed to patriotism. He promised law and order. He claimed to have this secret plan where he could end the war with honor, where the United States would not be losing face, wouldn't be backing out, although he didn't talk much about this plan that he supposedly had. George Wallace was an independent. He appealed to some of the conservatives. He opposed the civil rights movement. I won't ask you anything about George Wallace. You won't see him on the review sheet. So Nixon leads the campaign polls really early. Towards the end, it starts to get a little closer. Johnson is starting to negotiate some peace talks in Paris, like we talked about. He says that there's going to be an end to the bombing in Vietnam a few days before the election, and things get very, very close. Just 510,000 votes separated Nixon and Humphrey. Nixon won 300 in electoral votes, while Humphrey won 191. So it was kind of close as far as the popular vote, not quite as close in the electoral vote. This map kind of shows how that played out. And again, on this map, we're looking at the electoral vote, so it doesn't look near as close on there. But it was a very, very close election, with Nixon managing to win the presidency in 1968.